So, welcome back. Now, let's talk about something that the global elites do not want you to think about. Now, for decades, the United States has paid all the bills. We've carried the military burden and we've enforced the global stability while weaker nations just sat at the table pretending their opinions carry the same weight. And now, suddenly, people are shocked that Trump is saying now that if you want us to fund it, then America should run it. Think about it. The United States bankrolls the entire United Nations. The United States also provides all the military. We are the muscle. The United States enforces the outcomes. We also take the biggest risk. Yet we're expected to humor and lectures from countries that rely on us for protection and for survival. Why? Why should we pretend these countries are equal to us? How are they? We're the ones with the muscle. We're the ones with the money. But yet we have equal say so with these people who are not equally invested even in their own security. That has to stop. So when Trump floats the idea of a new peace alliance where nations pay to join and America leads, the media screams it's a power grab, but I call it reality. I've noticed that when it comes to the media, anything that is about the downfall of America or the downward trajectory or America losing a fight or losing something, the media and the left, they celebrate. They celebrate the demise of the country. They want to see us fail. They want to see us fall. We're not going to have it anymore. We're not going to leave it in their hands. And then also, why should countries that don't contribute anything have a veto power over the nation that provides everything? That doesn't make any sense. Why should you have a veto power over something that we want to do? How is that fair? You're not even equally involved. And why should America be obligated to listen to governments that need us more than we need them? See, this is not radical. This is leverage. This is how power actually works in the real world. And the real question is not whether this makes sense. The real question is why we tolerated this old system for so long. Let me go ahead and break it down for you and take a listen.
Seeks $1 billion for Board of Peace permanent membership. Countries must. Trump reportedly seeks $1 billion for Board of Peace permanent membership.
That makes already the number makes sense. But see, there's something else that NATO or the UN would never do, that if we create our own alliance, our own peace board that we could do, that will literally guarantee peace indefinitely. And I'll tell you what that is once this video is done.
Countries must reportedly pay at least $1 billion to secure a permanent spot on Trump's Board of Peace. A draft charter obtained by Bloomberg outlines hefty contributions for nations seeking permanent membership status. The White House Rapid Response account called Bloomberg's report misleading, denying the proposal's financial requirements. Conflicting narratives emerge as the administration and media debate the nature of the Board of Peace proposal. Follow us for more updates on global politics and international organizations.
Now, this is breaking news, but this should be expected from a businessman or someone like Trump. If we are going to run the United States like a corporation, then we must do what's in the best interest of our company. We cannot be so concerned about the outcomes of others. It's America first is the priority. So if we're going to only charge countries that can afford to be on the peace board, but think about it, when it comes to NATO and the UN, there are countries that have not paid their fair share in 20 years. And guess who's been covering the balance? We have. And what do we get out of it? We get disrespected. We get vetoes. We get other nations speaking to us as if they are our equals when they are extremely far beneath us because they are literally dependent upon us. It's like me taking advice on how to run my household from my toddler. You do not have an equal say so. You are a dependent. Trump is now figured out how this is going to work. So the UN is over. NATO is over. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization was only in power to keep the Soviet Union from expanding. The Soviet Union's been gone since 1991. So essentially, there is no purpose for NATO or even the UN. Because initially, I think the UN was only supposed to be there so that there would be less wars. But yet, there has been a war every single year since the inception of the UN, which was probably in what, 66? Let me ask Arthur, get a little clarity. Hey, Arthur, what year did the UN, what year was the UN created? And what year was NATO created?
Certainly, Rico. The United Nations UN was established in the year 1945, following the end of World War II, with the aim of promoting international cooperation and preventing future conflicts. Meanwhile, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was founded a few years later, in 1949, as a military alliance to provide collective security against the Soviet Union. Let me know if there's anything else you need.
Let me ask you a question. Russia is not the Soviet Union. So why can't Russia join NATO? And is Russia a part of the UN?
Certainly. Let me address both parts of your question in detail. First, regarding NATO. While Russia is indeed not the Soviet Union, the geopolitical landscape after the Cold War has created significant complexities. Russia has not joined NATO primarily because NATO was originally formed as a collective defense alliance, largely in response to the Soviet threat, and its expansion has often been viewed by Russia as a security concern. There have been periods of dialogue and cooperation between NATO and Russia, but fundamental strategic and political differences have prevented full membership from ever being seriously considered. As for the United Nations, Russia is indeed a member. In fact, Russia holds a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, a position inherited from the Soviet Union. This gives Russia significant influence within the UN framework. In summary, while Russia is a key part of the UN, the historical and strategic context makes NATO membership a different matter entirely.
Let me ask you this, Arthur, in your opinion, what is the benefit of the UN for the United States right now in our geopolitical climate? I don't see the purpose of NATO or the UN any longer.
Certainly. Let me address that from a formal and analytical standpoint. The United Nations for the United States primarily serves as a diplomatic and strategic platform. In the current geopolitical climate, it allows the US to engage in multilateral discussions, build coalitions, and exert influence on global norms and policies. While it is true that the US often bears a significant share of costs, the UN provides a forum where the US can address security issues, humanitarian concerns, and international law in a structured environment. As for NATO, its relevance today often revolves around collective defense commitments and deterrence, particularly in relation to potential threats in Europe and beyond. While some may question its necessity, others argue it remains a key pillar of Western security architecture, providing a framework for collective defense and a mechanism for the US to coordinate with allies. In essence, both the UN and NATO still provide strategic benefits to the US in terms of global influence, alliances, and diplomatic leverage, even if the specific dynamics have evolved.
So you have not said one thing that literally pertains to how either one of those benefit the United States itself physically. I've heard you talk about Europe. I heard you talk about other places. Neither one of those fit into the America First agenda, do they?
Certainly. Let me address that more directly. From a strictly America First perspective, the tangible benefits of the UN or NATO to the United States can be articulated in a few concrete ways, even if they may not always seem immediately domestic in nature. First, both the UN and NATO provide a platform for the US to prevent conflicts that could ultimately draw in American military forces or disrupt global trade routes that the US economy depends on. In that sense, these organizations can help avoid situations where the US would otherwise need to intervene more directly or
if what you're saying is correct, how many years since the inception of both has there been conflict on between these on Earth? How many years have we had of peace since the inception of the UN and NATO? How many years of peace have we had? Because I don't recall very many years where there weren't conflicts or fights.
Certainly. Let's put that into context. The United Nations was established in 1945 and NATO in 1949. And indeed, the world has seen numerous conflicts since then. The existence of these organizations has not eradicated war or conflict. That's a fair observation. However, these institutions were not necessarily designed to eliminate conflict entirely, but rather to manage it, reduce the scale of global wars, and provide a framework for diplomacy. For example, there has not been a large-scale world war since the founding of the UN. While regional conflicts, proxy wars, and various disputes have certainly occurred, the scale of global conflict has arguably been more contained. While the UN and NATO have not created a world without conflict, they have played roles in preventing certain conflicts from escalating into something much larger. From an America First standpoint, this can be seen as a form of risk management that helps avoid larger conflicts that could directly impact the United States. I hope that clarifies the perspective. Let me know if you need further details.
Combined on the UN and NATO, how much does the United States spend on average to fund both of those annually?
Certainly. To give you a clear and formal perspective, in general, the United States is indeed one of the largest financial contributors to both the United Nations and NATO. For the UN, the US typically funds roughly 22% of the UN's regular budget, along with a substantial portion of the peacekeeping budget.
Whoa. 22% is 1/5. How many nations are in the UN?
Certainly. Let me clarify that for you. The United Nations currently has 193 member states.
Whoa, wait a minute. Wait. Why the fuck are we paying 1/5 of all the costs when there's 190? I can see if there's only 5 countries. How is there 193 nations, member states, and we're paying 22%? Then what the hell are they paying? Please make it make sense.
Certainly. Let me provide a clear and formal explanation. The reason the United States pays roughly 22% of the UN's regular budget is rooted in the UN's scale of assessments. This scale is based on a member country's capacity to pay, which in turn is largely tied to its gross national income and overall economic strength. In other words, because the US has one of the largest economies in the world, it is assessed a proportionally higher share of the budget. Other countries pay significantly smaller shares depending on their economic capacity. For instance, many smaller or less economically developed nations contribute a very small percentage. So while it may seem disproportionate in terms of the number of member states, the funding formula is intended to reflect each country's ability to contribute. I hope that clarifies the reasoning behind the numbers.
It absolutely does not justify the reasoning behind the numbers. That doesn't make any sense. Why are we footing the bill? If there's 193 different countries in the UN, then why isn't this the cost of running the UN divided up between 193 different countries equally? That doesn't make any sense because these other countries have a say-so, they have veto powers, they have their opinions. Why is everybody not paying their fair share? Do you know how much more efficient it would be if countries were able to afford their own protection, if they were able to afford to have a say-so? How are we letting other countries talk to us and tell us what to do when they're not even paying anywhere near what we are paying? How is the rest of this pie being divided up? If we pay 22%, who's paying the rest? And how is that being broken down?
Certainly. Let me address that comprehensively. The United Nations funding model is indeed based on the idea that member states contribute in proportion to their economic capacity. While the United States does pay a significant share, about 22%, other countries contribute according to their own economic standing. To break it down further, after the US, the next largest contributors are generally major economies like China, Japan, and Germany, each paying a percentage that reflects their GDP. Many smaller nations pay less than 0.1% each. This is how the rest of the pie is divided. Each country's share is calculated based on its economic capacity. From a strictly America First standpoint, I understand your concern. The US is paying a larger share relative to the number of member states. The rationale behind this model, however, is that the UN's effectiveness relies on the financial backing of its wealthiest members. Without that, it wouldn't function at its current capacity.
Well, let me say this. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. So if Trump says, look, we're going to pull out of the UN, it's going to dissolve. We're going to start our own version of the UN called the Peace Board. Can you look up anything about this proposal, about this new system Trump wants to create?
Certainly. Here's a concise summary. Donald Trump has proposed.
This is breaking news, by the way.
Understood. I'll treat it with the seriousness it deserves. In that case, let me conclude this point by reiterating that this funding model is indeed a long-standing arrangement.
No. I want you to talk about Trump's new peace board. That's what I was asking you about.
Of course. Let me pivot back to that specific topic. When we look at Trump's proposed board of peace, essentially his vision of an alternative international structure, he's effectively proposing a model where nations pay a significant fee, in this case $1 billion, to join and have influence. This is essentially a pay-to-play approach, which is quite different from the UN's capacity-based contribution model. In other words, Trump's concept attempts to flip the existing structure on its head by making financial commitment the primary criterion for influence. This aligns with a more transactional and America-centric viewpoint, where the US might seek to control the agenda in exchange for the large financial contributions it makes. So in the context of your original point, this is indeed a breaking shift in approach. It's a move toward a model where influence is explicitly tied to financial input. Let me know if you need more details on that.
Well, listen, it appears to me that if Trump pulls out of, well, NATO's already done. So we don't, NATO's over. We lost to the Russians. So NATO is, it's inferior. So we're pulling out of NATO. If we can replace the UN with the Board of Peace, and if the ultimate goal is to bring in the Russians, because right now they won't allow the Russians into NATO. So that means there's guaranteed to always be a conflict with the Russians. They want to create this forever war against the Russians. Trump wants to shut that down. If we dissolve NATO because we pull out and there's no one that can fund it anymore, and we pull out of the UN because it can't be funded anymore, if we make a Board of Peace and we bring in the Russians, there will be indefinite peace. There will be no more conflict with the Russians. And that was one of our major adversaries. We, at this point, we should just be respecting each other's hemispheres and stay in and make this a tripolar world. But if we can bring in and create a Board of Peace where we're going to charge nations so that they can pay their own fair share for their security, well, then there won't be any more needs for conflict. I think this is probably one of the most efficient and best ways to go forward. The UN is outdated and it's shown zero results. NATO has achieved nothing. The whole purpose of NATO was to stop Russia. They couldn't stop Russia. NATO is over. I think something new that's more America focused and America controlled is what needs to be on the table. Besides, America's running the whole thing anyway. We might as well just make it official. What do you think about that?
Certainly. Let me address that in a formal and structured manner. From the perspective you're outlining, the concept of a Board of Peace indeed represents a radical departure from the established international order. It essentially suggests replacing multilateral institutions like the UN and NATO, which are based on shared governance and collective decision-making, with a structure that is more explicitly pay to join and therefore more directly controlled by those who fund it the most, namely the United States. In theory, if such a board were to bring in major global players like Russia, and create a new set of rules for engagement, it could, in a very optimistic scenario, reduce certain tension by aligning interests under a single, financially driven framework. The idea, as you've described, is that by consolidating power and financial responsibility, you eliminate some of the geopolitical friction. Of course, this is a significant departure from long-standing international norms and would likely be met with considerable resistance from other nations that benefit from the current system. It also raises questions about how equitable and stable such a system would be in the long run. In summary, your perspective is that this kind of restructuring could lead to a more streamlined and US-led global order, potentially reducing certain conflicts. It's an ambitious idea that would represent a fundamental shift in how international relations are managed. Let me know if you need any further analysis.
Well, this is the point. You have the Canadians are in China right now talking about a new world order where the Chinese are going to be the head. Then you have the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, talking about creating their new world order where they're going to be in charge. I don't want either one of them telling the United States and my country what to do. The United States' control will always and forever remain in the hands of nationalists and patriots. The threats of doom and gloom will no longer control our policy, and fear will no longer control our decision making. It's America first and America only. We will, if everybody wants to join a new world order, then the United States will take the lead and you will join our order. And that's going to be the best suggestion for you. If you want to try to go the opposite way, you can, you have that choice, but we're going to set up our own framework and our own world order, and we will bring in people that are our partners. We are better off with the Russians as an ally than all of those other European nations combined. Those European nations are dependents. The Russians actually have value. We have more in line strategically and morally with the Russians than we do with the Europeans. So if we set up a new board of peace and bring in the Russians, there's no need for NATO. All those wars are going to be a thing of the past, and we can move forward as a community. But we'll be able to maintain our sovereignty. We will not be a one world global order. It will be a tripolar world. But at least the United States will be in control of our future. We will not be under some one world umbrella where there's just no nation states and one military. We're not doing that. We're not going to let a fake alien invasion or another fake scamdemic push us into that either. That's done. So I'm really glad that Trump is doing this. I think this is like one of the best ideas he's came up with, and it's necessary. Everybody's looking for someone to follow. Well, then you can follow us. If you want to give away your sovereignty and turn your country over to the Chinese or the World Economic Forum, then you might as well just turn it over to us. And I've seen the Canadians are in China right now talking about New World Order, but I don't see the left in the United States talking bad about the Canadians and saying, oh, Canada, this and this, but yet they talk bad about the United States. I don't like it, and I don't agree with it, and moving forward, we're not going to have it anymore. The new board of peace is going to successfully replace the UN and the NATO. And we're going to bring in the Russians. That way we will have long-standing peace, and there will never be another conflict, hopefully, between superpowers that are nuclear armed. It won't make any sense. We'll all literally be able to work together. Just the whole notion of NATO was only built to box in the Soviets, and now they're using it against the Russians and trying to encircle them, and they wanted to invade their country, just kill their leader, and divide it up. And people over here in the West are celebrating. They were hoping that all of NATO wanted that. I'm just glad that Trump won and we're not going through that reality, because in another reality, we'd all be at war right now. And we'd be sending home troops, and not even in boxes, in bags. The meat grinder is no joke, and I'm glad we don't have to face it. Let me know your thoughts on the topic. I appreciate you guys who have tuned in tonight. This is just breaking news about the Board of Peace that Trump came up with. So there's going to be more articles coming out. I just wanted to be one of the first people to put it out there. Like and subscribe, share the video. Subscribe to the channel. I do a lot of different topics like this. We go over relationships, but we do a lot of politics and geopolitical frameworks, etc. So thank you for tuning in. I'll be back on in about an hour with another topic. Remember, America first, America only.
I've been needing to find a new apartment, which has not been easy with credit as bad as mine. Luckily, I found cosigning.com. They connected me with a cosigner who helped me get my dream apartment for me and my dog. I just paid a small fee and was able to move in fast. Get the cosigner you need for the apartment you want. Check out cosigning.com today.